Hello, my name is John Anderson. I am the product owner for Nautobot and a principal consultant at Network to Code. What I'd like to talk to you today is about the Nautobot 2.x roadmap, specifically what we'll be doing in 2.0 and with the rest of the 2.x train throughout the remainder of 2023. So before we get into that, I think it's important that we take a moment just to take a step back and look at where we are with Nautobot right now and where we've come from. Nautobot is been around since April of 2021, which is when we did our initial fork from NetBox and began to set ourselves apart from that project and start to build a network automation platform with a backing in as a network source of truth, right? So within that 1.0 fork, we introduced a lot of great functionality, GraphQL, data validation engine, custom relationships, the ability to sync data into Nautobot via Git repositories and so forth. Our 1.0 release added support for MySQL as an enterprise database backend. The ability to have read-only jobs and save GraphQL queries and things like that. Moving forward a bit, we added a lot of additional jobs enhancements around enterprise level approvals and scheduling capabilities, secrets provider functionality, and some enhancements to app plugin development like dynamic navigation support and so forth. 1.3 brought us dynamic groups, which are a great way to do dynamic grouping of objects based on custom criteria. We added support for JSON custom fields for specific network automation use cases, regular expression filtering, so advanced features like that, API token provisioning and versioning, which are very important for building automation tooling and so forth. 1.4, earlier this year, back in August, we added a lovely dark mode within our UI, and we'll talk about what we'll be doing with our UI moving forward in the 2.x train, of course. Job hooks was an amazing feature. It's seeing a lot of adoption for, again, very event-driven network automation use cases. Parenting of interfaces and additional enhancements within the app development experience, like the Nautobot UI view set, which reduces greatly the amount of boilerplate code that's necessary to create new functionalities in your own code. 1.5, released here just a few weeks ago in November 2022, represents our first LTM or long-term maintenance release of Nautobot, meaning that 1.5 will be supported by the development team and the rest of the support organization until our next LTM release in the 2.x train next year. And 1.5 did have of course, some new enhancements and functionality, some advanced filtering UI capabilities, job queue routing, which is very important in high scale and distributed environments looking to do job executions and distribute those based on different queue parameters. The Nautobot form set enhancements, which again is more boilerplate reduction for app developers. Custom field groupings, which is again targeting very hyper-specific network automation use cases, and device HA clustering, which provides enhancements to the network data model that we have within Nautobot. So, really just looking back over, honestly, just this short period of time that Nautobot has been around, just looking at the tremendous amount of effort that the team has put into it and the great backing of Network to Code in being able to deliver this level of functionality, we're extremely excited for what we have planned throughout 2.x and beyond for Nautobot over the next 3 to 5 years of roadmap that we have planned out at this point. But again, today we'll be looking specifically at what we've got planned for 2.0 and the remainder of 2.x throughout 2023. So one of the first themes that will be of specific focus within this 2.x train is going to be a total overhaul of the web user interface. Now, if you're using Nautobot today, you know that we've got some dated looking UI and specific technology that's being used that harkens back to the history of the project. But this is going to be much more than just a fresh coat of paint that we put on Nautobot. We're going to be taking a fundamental look at the user experience within the application. So we're not just going to make it look like a fresh new app with the same user experience. We are going to be looking at what are the flows and the deficiencies in the user experience that you have today. What are the areas that take the most amount of clicks for the workflows that you do the most day to day? And how can we make those easier? How can we make those interactions quicker, faster, more intuitive, and so forth? So this goes beyond, just a fresh coat of paint here. And of course, we need to do this in a way that is um, functionally compatible with application development patterns that we have that exist today, so that we're not making it harder or even impossible in some cases for application developers in the plugins that they create to integrate with the UI, because that is a foundational component of Nautobot being a network automation platform first. The next thing that we'll be looking at is an overhaul to our jobs ecosystem. So jobs has some rooted history in scripts and reports, and this has caused us to have a bit of bloat and technical debt that's stuck around since the beginning of the project. So what we want to be able to do is refactor these interfaces. We do expect some breaking changes here, so if you do have jobs, we will be providing documentation on migration strategies and paths for this. We don't expect a tremendous amount of disruption from an end user perspective here, but ultimately this is going to set us up to future-proof jobs as the way that network automation solutions should be built within Nautobot on an ongoing basis. But this will open up the door for much more complex and useful feature sets, like being able to revoke job executions, terminate jobs. The way that job logging works will be changed so that that's a little more user-friendly and usable in the enterprise space as well. Job chaining, this is how we'll get into workflows, so stitching multiple job executions together with programmatic business logic. Being able to output files that result from a job so that users can download those or maybe ship those files off to external systems and so forth. All these sorts of functionalities we want to do with jobs, and to get there we need to overhaul some of the internal interfaces that they're built upon. The next thing is the IPAM data model. If you are a user of Nautobot today and you use extensively the IPAM feature sets, you know that there are some significant deficiencies that are in the realm of unusability, quite honestly, within the data model, especially when you have a large enough data set. So what we'll be looking at here is a fundamental refactor of the IPAM data model in its entirety. In the end, we will still maintain the same level of functionality that we have today, but hopefully it'll work. So things like enhancing the way that the hierarchy works, parent-child relationships within prefixes, fixing problems related to the utilization and allocation calculations. That has a numerous number of rabbit holes that you can go down, but as a user, many of you may be aware of cases where those utilization calculations aren't what you expect them to be today. They don't work in the way that you think that they would. So we want to address those sorts of problems and along the way solve the scale and performance issues that this data model has that's inherent to the way that it's implemented today. So we'll be doing things like consolidating models. You'll see the aggregates data model go away, but again, we'll still have the ability to have the intent of what that model provides today, but consolidate in on just having a single prefix model and IP address model to be able to support that. Separation of status and type values for prefixes so that we can separate out internal business logic from what you as an organization want to track from a status perspective and so forth. We're going to introduce a extensible role model that operates in much the same way that the status model does today, that you can utilize across different models within the overall application as well. So again, really a focus on making the IPAM data model functional by refactoring some of the internal components, but in the end, making sure that we maintain the same level of functionality that we have today and open the door to greater enhancements down the road as well. Another major theme is related directly to the application developer experience. As you may know, Nautobot has a plugin architecture that forms the basis of the platform that we build a multitude of different solutions on top of that you as an end user can install based on your specific needs. And depending on your capabilities, maybe your organization even develops your own apps and plugins inside of your environment. So this theme is targeting some specific attributes of that experience, overall experience, from a developer standpoint, to be able to deliver those solutions. So we'll be refactoring a lot of the internal code base and the exposed developer API here in an effort to consolidate it greatly. You'll notice this, I think, primarily in the number of imports that you have to utilize to build particular apps and plugins. We're going to consolidate that down into one area of the application interface. And this will result in hopefully some reduced feature boilerplate and things like that. We've got some other enhancements planned there as well. And the big one here is going to be a very big focus on the developer documentation. We're very light on this today, unfortunately. We continue to build a lot of great functionality within this plugin API, but we want to make sure that we spend a great deal of time documenting it and making sure that what is publicly accessible is makes sense to you as a developer and so forth, and you know where to find it, and that it's useful documentation to you. Beyond those high-level themes, there's some general housekeeping and enhancements that we'll be making throughout the application. So a focus on data model natural keys, so moving away specifically from the usage of internal slug values or even just UUID primary keys. Those things still exist, but wherever possible, when the network data model itself provides a natural, unique constraint, we want to be able to use that as the natural key within the application so that it makes sense not only from the data model, but into you as a user, but that we expose that functionality throughout the UI and so forth. Things just make more sense that way. There's less technical overhead and implementation detail to realize those sorts of things. Along those same lines, we'll be taking a fresh look at some of the uniqueness constraints and indexing capabilities throughout the application. This is going to create a better network data model overall, but the indexing specifically will be able to realize a lot of performance improvements throughout the application in doing so. Next, we'll be consolidating the location models. So we have regions and sites and the additional location hierarchies functionality that came in 1.4. We'll be consolidating all of that down into a single location model. And of course, in doing so, we will maintain data migrations so that the hierarchies that you have built with regions and sites today, you'll still have all of that data moving forward, but hopefully it'll be a lot easier to work with having just one type of location model that you as an end user need to interact with on a day-to-day basis. And then I'll also, using the new location type functionality that did come in 1.4 as the basis for that, provide a lot of flexibility to model the hierarchies that you may need, both from a physical but also a logical location level at that point as well. We're making a lot of enhancements and cleaning up of the filtering capabilities within the application. We introduced recently some dynamic field capabilities. We have to refactor some of the internal code to expose that functionality throughout the entire application, so we'll be looking to make those things happen within 2.x as well. Next will be data import and export functionality. As an end user, you're certainly probably aware that we have capabilities for CSV export and custom export templates today. If you use these functionalities, you know that we also have import as well, but there's often a lot of inconsistencies between the formats of the data when it's exported. You cannot immediately take an export and then re-import that data. It often just doesn't work. So we want to fix those problems to make that sort of thing possible. And along the way, as a consequence of that, we should be able to support bulk updating of data. So you can export something, a filtered data set from the application, edit that data in bulk in Excel or likewise, and then re-upload that data set and have those changes bulk update and be reflected within the application. So a day-to-day operational enhancement that we're looking for there. We'll be taking a fresh look at our API versioning capabilities and providing default version semantics as well. So as an automation tooling consumer of the API, hopefully that will be helpful to organizations moving forward. And then, as I mentioned, just some general code refactoring. You'll see some things move around. If you are deep in the code base day to day because you're an application developer or so forth, you will notice some consolidation efforts in different apps internal to the code base and so forth. Nothing tremendously user facing if you aren't an application developer there, nothing really to worry about from that perspective. But if you are, you'll be able to see those things happening throughout 2.x. So beyond 2.0, what we'll be looking for is net new feature enhancements to all of those aforementioned themes. So, as I mentioned, 2.0 will be kind of a focus on some of the breaking changes necessary for the 2.x train. Once we're beyond that point and we're in, throughout the rest of 2023, we'll be looking for specific net new feature enhancements. So things that we can't do today. New features. So within jobs, for instance, we'll be looking for dynamic file output and user composability of the chaining functionality that I mentioned. So, being able to have like a web user interface for composing those workflows and so forth. System provided jobs. This will allow us to ship jobs within the core code base as well to provide more extensible and flexible interfaces for things like cleaning up changelog entries or Git synchronization jobs and things like that. Another big one that is really important to a lot of network automation jobs use cases is going to be native support for specific multi-processing use cases and concurrency limits. So this is going to be addressing problems of, if you have a job where you need to execute something across your entire inventory of devices, we're going to have proper mechanisms within the jobs interface to distribute that load in a meaningful way, and also be able to do things like if you have regional constraints on that execution for latency considerations or anything like that, security constraints or things like that as well. That will be built into the jobs interface beyond 2.0, kind of throughout the 2.x train. Concurrency limit, so if you need to limit the number of executions against a particular device, a resource constraint, for instance, or you want to make sure that a particular job is only executed one at a time, and so forth. We'll be able to support those sorts of things in the future as well. Additional enhancements to the application development experience. The Nautobot UI view set has been an honest godsend to quickly developing new application functionality. So we'll be looking to further simplify its usage through things like auto discovery of the features that it provides. So finding the classes that are defined for a particular model automatically so you don't have to define them. We'll be looking at a lot of deprecation and removal of old and cumbersome patterns within the application interface for development purposes there. That goes back to, as I mentioned, a lot of the refactoring that we'll be trying to do within 2.0 and so forth. So we will be looking to, once those interfaces are simplified, we want to remove those old patterns. But of course, when we do that, we're providing you a new, better pattern. So really this is just around removing confusion and possibilities for doing the wrong thing here. Custom field and relationship scoping, this has been a long-standing feature request. Often if I create a custom field or relationship, it's specific to a particular use case. Maybe I don't need that across my entire inventory of devices or address space, for instance. I want to scope that to a particular subset of my inventory or so forth. So we'll be looking to support that sort of use case going forward as well. And then, as I mentioned, enhancements to the API model, and this really goes towards the UI UX overhaul as well. Continued look at what are the key interaction areas within the application. What are you doing the most that causes you the most pain day to day? What takes you the longest, most number of clicks, and so forth, and really trying to simplify those workflows and make that as easy as possible for you to deal with on a day-to-day basis. So beyond just the Nautobot core application itself, what does this say about the ecosystem of applications in the 2.x train going forward? There's a few key points that I'll call out here. The Dolt version control app, which is our take on being able to version and stage data changes within the application. This is an add-on app that you'll be able to install using the Dolt database backend. That will be supported within Nautobot. This is something that we've been working on for a while in partnership with a company called Dolt Hub, who provides that Dolt database backend. So we will be targeting a beta of this new app with the 2.0 release of Nautobot. And then we'll be looking for production stability in the 1.0, the official 1.0 release of the version control app. Later on within 2023, this is going to be largely dependent on production stability of the Dolt database backend itself, with partnership again with the wonderful folks over at Dolt Hub. But again, if you're looking for things like ITSM, control on workflows, so being able to stage changes, do peer review of changes to data within Nautobot, and apply atomically those changes at some point in time, this really is the app that you've been waiting for, and we're really excited about it, and again, we hope to get that out to you in 2023. Secrets providers, so this is integration for sensitive data. We have a core functionality in here, but then we have an app called the Secrets Provider plugin that provides integration with things like HashiCorp Vault and so forth. We'll be looking to add support for additional secret provider integrations with other vendored applications throughout 2023 as well. The data validation engine, which is a way for end users to specify within the web user interface different constraints that affect users' ability to manipulate data within the application based on business rule requirements. Be adding some additional functionality here, like new rule types, to say, particular fields need to be unique or required if they are not required in the core application today. Complex regex context processing will also be a possibility. And I will note that these features are in flight right now for the data validation engine app, and they are likely actually to make it into the wild prior to 2.0, but just thought I'd use this opportunity to get that news out here as well. Continued overhaul of the ecosystem documentation and use cases. So you may have seen as an end user, we made some recent updates to the documentation for Nautobot and the overall ecosystem. Those are now found at docs.nautobot.com, where you'll find a landing page where you can navigate to the core documentation, learn about the platform and the source of truth use cases, but you can also go over to all of the ecosystem applications that Network to Code provides within the open source community as well. So we'll be continuing to integrate new apps in that documentation flow and make just general improvements to the use cases that are documented there as well. As application developers, I'm sure as I've gone through this presentation, you have begun to realize that it will be necessary to make specific updates to applications and plugins to support the 2.x train, and of course the new functionality that we'll be adding as we go throughout 2023 as well. To that point though, we have been working on enhancements to the CI/CD ecosystem to help make this effort as seamless as possible. So we have some things that we're doing within the Network to Code provided apps right now, where we can do automated and automatic recurring testing of applications excuse me, against the Nautobot core code base as well. So this will help us identify issues as the core team is working on this 2.0 breaking change functionality. We can get continuous feedback in the individual applications as those changes are being made. And likewise, kind of along that same train of thought, we will be making some enhancements to the packaging tooling, with the end goal ultimately being easier end-user management, making it easier to consume the packaging options that we have for operating Nautobot within your environments. So if we kind of summarize what we've got here, kind of the key takeaways here are going to be that 2.0 specifically is going to focus on the UI overhaul and the critical breaking changes that we as the core team have identified as being necessary to realize the full 2.x vision throughout 2023. So the difference there, right, 2.x is going to be a series of releases throughout 2023, 2.0 being the first in that series within the 2.x train. So 2.0 will see those critical breaking changes be the first thing that we work on. And then, the sexier features, new functionality will come throughout 2023 in those various releases of the 2.x train. So we expect that the 2.0 release, that first release, to come in early Q2 of next year, 2023. And then, as I mentioned, the rest of the 2.x train will run throughout the remainder of the year and ultimately culminate in a new LTM release. Again, 1.5 is our current long-term maintenance release. And once we hit the LTM release for the 2.x train, 1.5 will be deprecated at that point in time, and that new LTM release for 2.x will become the path forward. So with all that said, how can you keep up to date with all of this? Myself and the team will be working going forward to do more of these sorts of high-level roadmap presentations within the community. So hopefully you found this useful. I'm going to be doing a lot more of them going forward. But on a day-to-day basis, as you know, Nautobot is an open source project. What you might not know is that we actually operate using agile software development, but our backlog is fully transparent. Uh, Everything that we do from a management standpoint on the project is in the open source realm and is tracked within GitHub. Specifically, we use the project's functionality within GitHub to see that. So there's a link there to the specific project that I'm talking about, and there you'll find some tabs for the entire project backlog will be there, but there's also specific 2.0 tabs. And then if you're interested, you can actually keep up with the sprint backlog on a day-to-day basis as well. Milestones we also use within GitHub. If you're familiar with those are a great way to keep up with individual minor releases, the scope for those as well. So as we make changes, you'll see those reflected within the project and the milestones. So to that point, please note that anything in this presentation, as well as everything that's in the backlog, is subject to change at any point in time. That's really just going to be based on market demand. From a product ownership standpoint, I try and stay up to date on the trends and whatnot. But moreover, it's basically when there's significant desire from the user community to do something, we want to be reactive to that. So we're not trying to say that here's the roadmap for the next 3 to 5 years and this is what you get and it's only what you get, right? We are reactive to user need and so forth. So you will see the backlog always evolving, but the point being that you can keep up with it within Nautobot, and then also in these presentations that I'll be going through going forward. So with that, I know I did a lot of talking, but I do hope that you found this useful as a means to understand what we have planned for 2.0 and beyond throughout the rest of 2023. As always, if you do want to reach out to us, you can find us in the Slack community and of course on GitHub. if you have specific feature requests or bug reports or anything like that. So again, my name is John Anderson. I'm the product owner for Nautobot, and I do greatly appreciate your time in going through this presentation with me. Take care.